Welcome, everyone, to the next episode of the CEO Next Door. We're happy you are spending some time with us today. With me today, this is Mike Mayer, by the way. With me today is Donovan Morrison and our esteemed guest, Clint Daoud. Clint is the co-founder and CEO of Unifin Incorporated out of Niles, Illinois. How's it going, Clint?
Good. Happy to be here.
Yeah,
This is awesome.
great. Great. Well, I think we are excited to jump right in and get to know you a little bit better. So why don't you start with what you have going on now, what you're up to, maybe just like your quick elevator pitch and let's get into your entrepreneurial background.
Oh, for sure, for sure. So CEO, co-founder of Unifin Inc. We're an outsourcing company that focuses on debt collection, customer care, and back office processes. And we also do some offshore staffing solutions. It's been interesting. Have dedicated offices. As you stated, our headquarters is in Niles, and then dedicated offices in the Philippines, Guatemala, and Egypt. So it's been a very interesting ride, especially post-COVID.
Well, I
Awesome.
definitely want to go ahead, Donovan.
I was going to say you're
Yeah.
CEO. You started the business. How long ago did you start it?
Yeah, so started the business the business was incorporated in 2011. So been running since then. And it's changed multiple times since then. But added new divisions, added different business lines and services that, basically trying to be as malleable as possible for our clients and trying to achieve their goals and what they need.
What did you start with? Because it sounds like you have four different services. You
Yeah.
started with one, and I'm assuming.
Yes. So
Yeah.
I started my call center career as a debt collector. And it's funny because it's kind of like a full 360. It's actually in the very building that we occupy today in Niles.
Oh, wow.
The company was called Aero Financial Services. And it eventually got acquired by Sallie Mae at the time, back in 2003. And back then we were servicing pretty much consumer debt, Capital One, Citibank, to name a few. And then went off, worked at another company where I got introduced to collecting on defaulted student loans on the federal student aid contract. And because myself and at the time my two partners, it's just me and one of my partners today, but there was three of us that started the business. We all really understood the student loan space after about 3 years. And then the company that we were working for had a need for a subcontracting opportunity where we kind of basically told them like, hey, we could do this. After about a year of going back and forth, presenting to them, giving our business plan, that's kind of how Unifin actually was born. So we started as a subcontractor, working for this company on the federal student aid contract. And from there, it just kind of evolved into servicing direct creditors. And then in 2019, basically offering customer care, back office services, and then more recently offering the offshore staffing solution. So the business has taken a turn multiple times, and it's been for the best. I mean, our business, honestly, probably wouldn't still be here because of COVID and what happened with student loans if we were completely entrenched and just focused on the student loan business. And some of the changes that we made and being able to diversify the business offerings has helped us continue not just to be here, but continue to thrive and succeed.
How big is the company?
We're about 1,000 employees
Holy
in
cow.
4 different countries.
Tremendous.
So
Yeah.
Clint,
And
you mentioned three or four very unique international locations. I think you said Egypt, Guatemala, Philippines, and maybe one other. How and why each of those individual places? Because again, they're very, very unique and distinct.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started actually going down the road of wanting to start an offshore site back in 2015. It wasn't until about 2016 that we actually launched, but we launched Philippines first. Very well-known outsourcing country. At the time, I think 10% of their GDP was basically outsourcing. I think it's grown since then. They handle a lot of customer care, a lot of back office work. Some of the biggest BPOs that exist actually do a majority of their business out of the Philippines and India still. And for us, it was just a natural place to go. So we ended up in Philippines first, just because it was just, again, the talent was there for us to be able to hire and recruit, and what we needed at the time. But then from there, we realized that we needed a Spanish-speaking agent. And as more Spanish support was requested from our clients, we originally started in Mexico using a third party as a subcontractor for us. And we worked with them for a couple of years, but then shortly after that, we, based on the research and just kind of figuring out what makes the most sense for our organization, countries like Costa Rica, Panama were on the list, as well as Guatemala and Nicaragua is what we were looking at. And we just ended up in Guatemala just because of the where we had found one of our competitors at, and we were able to pull some good talent out of. So, but yeah, Spanish speaking there. And then Egypt, interesting enough, just trying to break into the Arab speaking world, right? So there's business to be done in the Middle East. We don't do any business today with them, but we're looking at potentially expanding into areas outside of the United States, and we're really looking at the Middle East. So having that Arab speaker, that natural Arab speaker, was something that we were looking for. And it's interesting enough with Egypt, because you're so close to Morocco and Algeria, you get French speakers out of there. You even get Spanish speakers out of there. So we do have some Spanish speaking agents that support some of the lines of business that we work in Egypt. So it's very interesting country.
Talk to us about the different rates you would pay, like, for an equivalent role in those various countries, to give people an idea of hiring in the US versus Philippines, Egypt, Guatemala.
Most of our clients typically see about a 60% savings on their salaries. Sometimes it's bigger than that, but I would say on average it's about 60%. A lot of jobs that, and the way I typically pitch it, and on the outsourcing side, like, from a BPO standpoint, typically these companies are outsourcing their entire departments. Customer care, for instance, we'll manage everything from A to Z for them, and back office processing, or if they're looking for somebody to manage some of their social media, MIS, some of the data, reporting, or whatever it is that they need. We do everything from like Oscar reporting to various different types of reporting. So it just depends. I mean, if you're looking for, and like I was saying, the way we typically pitch this is if the person can be remote and they can work from home, and it's okay for you to offshore it, you'll typically save about 60% plus on the salaries.
And any of those three countries versus the US, 60%, or are those?
Yeah, I would say on average between the three. Guatemala, it's a little bit more expensive in Guatemala than it is in the Philippines. Okay. I'd say Egypt is on par with the Philippines from a pricing perspective. So you'll get pretty educated individuals that understand the business. I have clients that outsource accountants with us that just need basically basic financials, or they're doing AR AP work. I have clients that have, believe it or not, this is interesting. I have a client that's a property management company that actually outsources to us their property managers, vendor managers. So they're kind of like the first line of defense when a tenant is calling in and needs something. Those individuals are there. They also do some collections for them and work like that. So the way I see it is, especially post-COVID, when a lot of companies are now used to having employees that are remote, it's a nice way of looking at it from a cost savings perspective. But not just that, we, especially in the last 3 years in the United States, we've been seeing a lot of attendance problems and attrition problems, and I feel like it's become a solution. We do all the heavy lifting actually when it comes to sourcing and recruiting. So a lot of our clients appreciate that they don't have to sit there and deal with it. We ask them for a job description. We'll create the job description, and then we'll go to post it. We'll put together a market analysis. We'll provide them with the costs are going to be for that specific role. And then we typically are able to source and recruit it within 30 to 45 days.
Do you have all of your offshore folks working US hours?
Yes. Yeah, for the most part. Yeah. If it's a US client that they're supporting, yes. It just depends on what they need or what it is. Some of our clients are 24/7 support. But yeah, so in the Philippines, they're working third shift, and we take care of that. Typically there's what we call night differential that we pay for them, that we pay them on. So, but yeah, they all work pretty much US support hours.
Have you done a lot of traveling to see these teams?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely necessary to do so. And it's part of ensuring that our culture stays intact, and making sure that everybody's on board and just understands what we're doing. It's when you have an employee that's, let's say we're outsourcing them to client A, right? A lot of times they have to, in their mind, think that they're working for client A, although they're working for Unifin. So
Sure.
that is something that we really try to instill in our employees, and we'll give them swag, and we'll have parties for them. And then a lot of our clients will also visit the sites, and they'll go and visit their teams that are out there, depending on the size of the teams. But yeah, it's really important to ensure that you're showing face and that culture sticks.
Do you have further international expansion plans, or are you pretty happy with where things are at right now?
I'm pretty happy. I feel like we're well-rounded in regards to what we're offering. It's never, I'm not going to say no. It's possible in the future, but not in the meantime.
Okay, makes sense. Makes
Yeah.
sense. So I'm guessing, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, but I would assume that when you were growing up, you might not have had Unifin in mind as what you would be doing when you were older. So would love to
No.
hear, I think you grew up in Chicago. I would love to hear about
Correct.
your upbringing and just kind of talking through your journey and how you ended up actually being led to founding Unifin.
Yeah. So my parents and my sisters are all originally from Iraq. We migrated here in the late 70s. I was the firstborn of our family here in the United States. And yeah, just growing up in the city, it's interesting times, 80s and 90s to be in Chicago. Grew up, from my recollection, I mean, I was born on Hermitage and Devon, for some of you guys that, know where, Chicago on the north side. Then we ended up living on Catalpa and Ravenswood, so that whole Edgewater area. And then finally moved to the Lincoln Square. It was really called Budlong Woods at the time, and went to Budlong and went to Amundsen until we moved out of there and ended up in Niles North and graduated from there. But yeah, interesting times. I mean, just kind of growing up in Chicago, and just in an immigrant neighborhood, and Chicago is known for having its kind of like their neighborhoods of different immigrants, Ukrainian Village, and Pilsen, and all the other different areas, Albany Park, and it was cool. Just like good memories, and it was awesome. Never envisioned being in the call center business. Actually, as a matter of fact, when I graduated high school, didn't go to college, ended up going to a trade school to become Microsoft certified. So it was Microsoft certified service engineer, or MCSE, and got my A+. I wanted to go into IT. Didn't know why, just it was the thing to do at the time. Went to schooling, got my certificates, and I ended up in IT for a little bit until I really, really wanted to join the military. And I ended up joining the Air Force, did my stint in the Air Force, got out a little early. And by the time I got out, my friends were all working as debt collectors at this company, Aero Financial. And they were just like, you'd be great at this job. And I'm just like, debt collections, phones, I don't know if I'm going to really like this. But it all worked out. It was pretty cool. Great experience. And I got to cut my teeth into an industry that was new to me. But yeah, it was really interesting. Just kind of, again, growing up in Chicago and just kind of being around that whole group that was, like I said, a lot of my friends and peers that I grew up with, doing that work. And I'm just like, yeah, let's give it a shot.
Was Unifin your first venture into running a business, or
No.
did you have some other opportunities prior to that?
Yeah, no, it wasn't actually the first time starting a business. And to be fair, just growing up, I was that kid knocking on doors, seeing if I can, mow the lawn or clean up, and whatever I could do to make some money. Grew up, relatively lower to middle class. My dad was a teacher, but there was 9 of us in the house with my grandmother living with us. And I have 4 siblings, my mom and my dad. And, and he was supporting some of the family too, back home, and helping people kind of come here. But basically, I don't think college was really an option. At least for me, it wasn't at the time. And I actually started working when I was 13 years old. I really wanted to play baseball. But by the time I got into high school, just realized I had ambitions of wanting to buy a car and things like that. And I knew my dad wasn't going to be able to help me out. So I ended up getting a job making pizzas and working behind it in the kitchen. So I did that from when I was 13 to 16. And along that route, just various different businesses. I'll name a few. One of them was I started as a merchant processing, an ISO for merchant processing. That was while I was still at Aero Financial, and we started a company. It was me and a friend of mine, and it was a good hustle. Kind of going around from small business to small business, seeing who was willing to do merchant processing, and we did it for about a year. Ended up with probably a handful of clients, and just realized it just wasn't for me at the time. The knocking on the doors and going door to door at the time was just a lot of, I guess the juice wasn't worth the squeeze at the time for me. I hadn't really figured it out, and I was still trying to juggle that while I was working as a debt collector at Aero. So
just to clarify, merchant processing is like credit card processing?
Credit card processing, yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. From the POS system, selling the POS systems, trying to change, sell interchange rates, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover, things like that. So yeah, tried that out. And it was interesting. And again, I think it was a great opportunity to learn, to work with other business owners and to learn from them. Just wasn't for me at the time. And I think it was taken away from what I was doing on the debt collection front. And then later on after that, interesting enough, when I first got married, I don't remember how I found it. I found Alibaba, which everybody knows Alibaba today. But this was probably back in 2008 or 2009. Started working with some Chinese manufacturers, and I was basically selling hair products, everything from not hair products, but like hair dryers, straighteners, things like that I was basically getting from China, getting them shipped over here, and then selling them either on Amazon or whatever it was. And then it was pretty successful. I started doing that, and then I got into doing phone cases, and started selling some phone cases and things like that. But again, at the same time, I was taken away from what I was doing in the debt collection world and gave that up after about a year and a half. But it was a pretty cool venture, and it was very successful at the time. But I think, again, the amount of work that I was putting in on getting all the orders and managing all the orders and then shipping them out it seemed like a lot. And when my wife got pregnant with our first kid, she's like, I don't know if I could really be carrying this stuff to USPS. And I'm just like, yeah, it just might not make sense anymore. But it was definitely a cool venture.
Why hair dryers?
It was actually in demand. And I was able to get them when I was buying them in bulk. I was getting them for like, I want to say $4.50 a piece. And then like hair straighteners were going for, $35, $40. And I think they still go at that rate. So the margins were really good on it. So that was kind of what, led me to it. As a matter of fact, my mother-in-law has owned the salon. She still owns the salon. It's in Albany Park over there on Kimball and Lawrence. That's why I kind of got the idea. It was just from her and just understanding that there was a demand and need for that. I think I started stocking stuff in her salon for a little bit too. So
smart.
So yeah.
Did you private label, or you were just like?
Yeah, they're exactly. They were private label, so you could put anything on them.
Right.
What
was the brand that you were using?
I don't remember. It was some kind of generic brand. It was like HS Styles, something like that, which meant just hairstyles. I wasn't really trying to brand it and trying to grow it at the time. It was just more of an opportunity to try to compete against some of the bigger names, because some of the bigger names, they sell for $60, $70, $80. So it was more of a low cost option.
Yep.
So did you say that your mom owned or owns
Mother-in-law?
Okay.
My mother-in-law. Yeah. She's been in the hair business for 30 years, still owns it. It's still there, but she lives with me here in Arizona. So she's given it to somebody else to kind of manage for the last couple of years since we've been living in Arizona. But she still has it, and she's out there right now, actually, over there at the salon.
Outside of your mother-in-law, any other family members who have pursued entrepreneurial ventures, or are you kind of the sole Daoud who's set out on his own?
Yeah, on my immediate family side, me. I'm trying to think. I recently connected with my first cousin here in Arizona since I moved here, and I live in Scottsdale now for the last 2 years. But he had a auto glass shop out in Michigan. Didn't really connect with him while he was doing that. He doesn't do it anymore. But yeah, I don't think entrepreneurship is really in our DNA. I'm not sure where I got it from. I do have an uncle that not really close to him, but he actually started a business out in San Jose back in the 80s and 90s, and he was very successful doing it. But again, not really close to him, talking to him about that. So,
Okay. So you had these kind of side hustles going while you were doing debt collection, while you were starting a family. What came next?
yeah. So, as I was saying earlier, when I was working at a company called Van Root, they had the student loan contract. Opportunity came about, debt collections. I mean, again, I always lived, I would say, under our means. And so did my business partners at the time. We had a very competitive. We were, collections is it's performance based at the end of the day. And gave us an opportunity to kind of build the savings, I guess, for ourselves. And the opportunity came, it was at a Christmas party. The VP at the time was having a drink with us, and he was just, we weren't just debt collectors. That was something that I think is really important to note. Typical debt collectors, typical phone agents are concerned with their day-to-day deliverables and what they need to do. For us, we were really entrenched in the business. So we were constantly communicating with the management team and just letting them know like different strategies. So we were working on strategies. We were working on different ways of optimizing, whether it was back office processes or process excellence. And now that I look back, I mean, I didn't know a lot of these terms, but what we were basically doing was helping the business become more productive, more efficient. And we were at a Christmas party, and he was just basically, we were just chatting. He's like, man, if the three of you guys ever got together and did something, it really would be magic. And that kind of triggered in my brain getting us together. And one of my partners, who isn't with us anymore, already actually had started the business as a debt collection company. He had a license in Illinois, but he wasn't doing really anything with it. So when I approached him and started talking to him about it, he's like, yeah, I'm already doing this, and this is what I'm doing. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. So I was like, I have an idea. I'd like to get with you. But if I do it, I want to bring in my other partner, Tom, who's still my partner today, because me and him work together at Arrow. I was like, I'd like to do this. So I sat down and laid out the plan. And interesting enough, when we actually started the business, the subcontracting opportunity hadn't come around just yet. And we were actually scared if they were going to find out, they were going to let us go, but we wanted to start it anyways. And then when they found out, they're like, yeah, you should have told us, we have this subcontracting opportunity. You should throw your name in the hat. And but he kind of like at the time loosely told us about it. And we're like, what do we need to do it? And he kind of gave us a brief rundown of what needs to happen. And at the time, we left his office and we all looked at each other and we're like, we need to do this, right? We need to go all in. And I had, my daughter was probably 6 months old. My wife was pregnant with our second kid. And, my wife wasn't planning to continue working at the time. So it was an interesting time, to say the least. Starting a family, having a young family, and then basically taking a risk and just having all of your life savings to go into a business, not knowing what was going to happen, was really interesting. And we all went in together. We just kind of jumped, both feet in. And as a new company that hadn't really proven ourselves, but as individuals had proven ourselves, we threw our name in the hat against two other existing organizations. And we actually won just because of our plan and what we had done for the organization prior to that. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just the debt collection. It was, how are you going to actually, be able to support as a subcontractor all these various different roles, because it's not just the debt collection. Now it's having, team leads and managers and having the back office people, accounting and everything else that goes with a business. And we laid it all out in front of them and told them what we would do. And they basically took a gamble and gave us an opportunity. And after about, I think, a year and a half or 2 years, we were managing a little over a third of the business for them, which was pretty large. And then we started helping them with some more process improvements, and some other things happened at the time. I think it was Obama was the president, and then he came out with the Student Loan Act. And some people with student loans will know this. They had a income-based repayment plans that they started pushing out, and this was for defaulted student loans. So we started putting together a lot of the different ways to calculate that and being able to understand based on their income what those payments were going to be. And so with all that said, it led us down a path of being able to establish a business. And we had only one client for 3 years, but it was great because it gave us an opportunity to basically start. And it was something that we already knew and we were passionate about, was basically helping customers and helping, in this case, student loan holders with trying to get them out of default. But then, after that, it kind of led us into other areas of what we were trying to do. And my biggest thing has always been about diversification. I always live in a paranoid mindset. And I guess this kind of leads to the reason why I wanted to start a business to begin with, because, approaching that, I was, I think 30 years old at the time. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't have a college degree. I know what I'm good at, but I can't be doing this for the rest of my life. Right. So what's next? Right. And for me, it was always trying to figure out what's next, and just being paranoid about ensuring my success as an individual, and in this case for the organization, and moving that, driving that ball forward. So I think it's Andy Grove has a really cool quote, and I'm not the type of person that memorizes quotes, but he says, and I'll paraphrase, I don't remember exactly, but something to the nature of success breeds complacency and only the paranoid survive. I think he wrote a book on that only the paranoid survive. And I've lived in that mindset. I still live in that mindset today. And that's the reason why we offer all these different services today, is because if one thing fails, I don't want to be stuck. And there's been organizations that were really, really good at the student loan game, and even service not just federal student aid, but also serviced hundreds of schools. But when everything went into a moratorium, those businesses stopped. They had to lay off all their employees. Those businesses literally ended overnight. And I know a few of those guys that just closed up shop. And for us, we had all this other business that we were able to lean on. So it was that continuation of what, of business without having to be concerned with a moratorium, in this case for student loans. So,
Clint, I would imagine you have baked up your secret sauce on how to collect debt from folks. And I know I don't want you to, open the kimono completely, but I think we would all be interested in give us a taste of your strategy, because it's not an easy attack to get people to pay up. So what, is it emails? Is it phone calls? Do you have bots doing it? Or what's the best process that you found that works?
So I would start with the approach first. And I've talked about this a lot in other podcasts and webinars and just other areas where I've been asked to speak. First and foremost, we use an empathetic approach. There's a lot of negative, there's a lot of negativity that surrounds debt collection, right? Sure. You kind of look at debt collectors as like this big bad wolf, trying to take money from people that, whatever. And partially it's because the industry had that reputation, especially going back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. It was like that. It was, beat somebody over the head, try to get the money out of them, right? When I first started in debt collection, I used to hear all these different people talking, right? You're in the middle of a call center and you can kind of hear people talking, and they had all these different approaches. And the approach was all very similar. It was a very harsh approach towards trying to get people to pay. Sure. That's just not my personality. It never was. And for me, when I used to teach collectors how to collect and the art of collections, it's like anything else, right? There's an art and science to it. There is a science that you have to follow, a methodology, but at the same time, there's an art of deliverability, because it's you speaking to another human, right? You're talking to another person. And how do you get across, and how do you break that barrier down? The minute they pick up the phone, there's a defense wall that's put up, and how do you break that down, right? So it always started with empathy and just understanding that that's another person on the other end of the phone. They have their own things that they're going through in life, that we should be aware of, just as we do. So I've always taught that, and just understanding, like, how can we make this a win-win, right? How do we make it a win for our client in this case? And how do we make it a win for the consumer? And that's the approach that we still use today. So from an approach standpoint, that's it. From a actual system standpoint, historically, debt collections has always been outbound phone calls and letters. That's just what it's always been. Mm-hmm. You send a letter to somebody, they see the letter, they remember what it is, or now it's the right time for them to pay, they'll pay it. Same thing with a phone call. You get them at the right time and it makes sense. You come to some sort of agreement, and they'll pay it. But now in today's world, with the advent of digital collections, and a lot of this actually came to fruition recently, debt collection is really, it's really far behind when it comes to technology, only because of the regulatory statutes that have been put in place, both federally and in some cases statewide. It's a heavily regulated industry. So it wasn't until the CFPB came out with something called Reg F back in, I think it was December of 2021, where they outlined certain approaches where we can use emails and texts and things like that, so long as there's certain types of consent. There's a lot of regulation that kind of goes around it, but it opened up the door for a digital strategy. And since then, and again, some of the things that I've been able to lead in our organization is being able to create a system. And I started, actually, we worked on creating the system back in 2018, 2019. It's basically a debt negotiation portal. It's where consumers can actually go. It's a self-service portal. They can see their debt. They can update their information if they need to. But what's really cool about it is, yeah, you can make a payment on it just like any other payment portal, but there's also a debt negotiation feature in it. And what I mean by that is when an account goes into a charge-off status, a lot of the times the creditors want to try to get something better than nothing. So they're willing to discount that debt. And what our system does is, based on the parameters that the clients give us, if they say, hey, yeah, you can go as low as, you could take 30% off the bill, we're able to basically program that into the system. And then now the consumers are able to go in there and they can offer $1, they can offer $2 or whatever it is. It's going to go back and say, unfortunately, we can't take that right now. This is what we could do. And it'll go back with them with a counter offer, and it gives them 3 options. And that's been really cool. And we've been able to drive traffic, not just through letters and being able to talk to them, but we're also utilizing things like emails and text messages. We have live chat agents. So really utilizing the full gamut of communications from a digital standpoint, and being able to drive that consumer into our portal to be able to communicate with one of our collectors. And as I was saying earlier, if you go back even like 5 or 7 years ago, the vast majority of collections was in an outbound effort. It was done, probably 80% of it was outbound effort. Today, from our standpoint, as an organization, almost 65, almost 70% actually of our collections is driven inbound. So we're driving those consumers through some sort of text message or email or through our portal to come in and engage with us. And it's nice because now it gives the consumer the power of, when they're ready, right, based on their life, whatever's going on in their life and their circumstances, to be able to go in and make a payment that actually makes sense for them, right? Mm-hmm. If they can't pay the full amount today, we're willing to work with them and set them up on a payment plan with a discount, sometimes without a discount. It just depends on what the client parameters are. But at the end of the day, we're trying to meet them where they're at. And I would say, people have this like misconception of, humanity as a whole. Believe it or not, when people borrow or receive a service and then they have to pay it later, a lot of times people want to pay it back. It's just, unfortunately, circumstances happen in people's lives, right? And it's just a matter of timing at that point. It might be 6 months, it might be a year later, or sometimes even not 3-4 years later, but they will pay it, right? I mean, I feel like at the end of the day, they'll get to a point where they'll be like, yeah, I could take care of it now. I might as well take care of it. It's very rare that somebody actually goes in to a debt obligation with the intentions of not wanting to take care of it. So makes sense. That's just based from my experience being in the industry for almost 20 years now.
Would you say that more empathetic inbound approach has become industry standard, or is Unifin fairly unique in that?
No, I think a lot of agencies have driven towards that, right? There's been, again, the CFPB has outlined a lot of these rules. I think the CFPB was created back in 2012 under the Obama administration. And over the years, it's gone through a couple of administrations, obviously, but they've outlined, right, unfair and deceptive acts and practices, UDAP rules that apply to debt collection as well as other lenders and things like that. But with that, I think that it's really been an opportunity for the industry to clean up its act and be able to actually meet consumers where they're at, as opposed to again, the way things were before. I would say that, again, it's anecdotal. It's just my opinion here, based on working at 2 separate agencies prior to creating Unifin. I think the standard approach was that beat them over the head approach. And I want to say in the last 10 years, that's really flipped. And it's more of, hey, how can we work with you? And how can we, any agency that's actually in business today and succeeding, and wants to continue to succeed and do the right thing for their clients and their clients' consumers, they have to follow that approach. I think, in my opinion, it's really necessary.
Sure. So you've definitely just touched on this a bit, and I think you alluded to this during our conversation earlier. When folks hear about debt collections, there oftentimes are negative connotations attached. Are there any myths or misunderstandings about the industry, or just anything that you would like the general public to know after your many years in the industry that folks may not think about when debt collection comes to mind?
Yeah, I think that, and I would say a knee-jerk reaction by most consumers when they get a letter or a phone call is to shut out that collector or not give them an opportunity. I think that with the industry and the way it's changed, especially in more recent years, give that person an opportunity, listen to what they have to say, and don't be scared to try to negotiate. If they're able to negotiate, they will negotiate a discount. At the end of the day, it's not a matter of, you have to pay anything. I don't think anybody's forcing anybody unless there's some sort of, legal consequence to it. And usually that has to be outlined in writing, and you're served typically. But, at the end of the day, it's just doing the right thing and making sure that, and I would say that in most cases, that collector is trying to do the right thing too. So again, I think that from a myth standpoint, people automatically have this wall that they put up when they're talking to collectors. And I don't think that's really necessary. Just be upfront and honest with them. And if you don't want to have that conversation, you don't have to. But, again, I think that's where consumers especially can try to engage with collectors and be able to, handle their debt obligation.
Clint, with a pretty sizable company with 1,000 employees, I got to imagine you're working a lot. How do you maintain sanity? What's your work-life balance look like? What's the day-to-day? How do you keep it all together?
So first of all, I've never really believed in work-life balance. It's work-life harmony. To me, it's kind of one and the same. Yeah, it is. It is insane. I mean, I wear multiple hats and always have. I have a really, really good team of individuals. It's the way our business has been structured and the way we've built it. So they handle a lot of the day-to-day for me. So that's been huge. At this point, I think my partner and I really are focused on strategy, whether it's on collections, whether it's on customer care, whether it's on back office, whether it's on the staffing side of the house. We're constantly looking at how can we deliver the best service for our clients at the best price. And that's what we're, whether it's from a performance-based standpoint, or if it's if we're meeting some sort of service level agreements or whatever our SOW is and how it's outlined, our job is to try to produce, so it's productivity, it's efficiency, and it's basically reliability of our staff and ensuring that they're there. So I've always looked at it from that standpoint, especially in the more recent years. So I would say my day-to-day really is focused on meeting with my team. I meet with clients a lot, but it's a lot of time is spent with meeting with my leaders and making sure that, they have what they need to be able to be successful in their day-to-day operations.
What do you do? You have a home life, do you work out? Like, what else do you do to balance yourself though? Besides,
yeah, no, that's a good question. I'm typically up at 4:45, 5 a.m. And in more recent years, I've tried getting back control of my health. I would say for a period of about 3 years, I let that go. I've always been somewhat of a gym rat, like to be in the gym, like to work out. I'm big into lifting. And I follow a lot of the biohackers that are on YouTube. I think those guys are pretty cool. So I've tried everything from cold showers to sauna to different, fad diets. And I'm on one right now. It's been pretty cool. It's been working for me, but yeah.
What is it? What's the diet that you're on?
So I started about 2 months ago on a carnivore diet. And I literally stripped everything out. So it got to a point about 2 months ago where I started going to the gym about 4 or 5 months ago, but I wasn't seeing results. And it was about 3 years prior to that before I had actually a really good routine and I was in really good health. And what I mean by a really good health for me is I'm looking at my biomarkers from a blood standpoint and, all the things that everybody looks for. But it reached a pinnacle, a peak to me where I'm like, I got to do something about this, and I got to not just lose weight, but more so I'm focused on inflammation. So I started the carnivore diet just based on a lot of the data. And to be fair, I've done everything. So about back in 2012, I tried being all vegan, all natural. And it didn't sit with me well, right? I know for some people it does really well, but for me, after about, I think I was on it for about 18 months, I just didn't like the way the way I looked and felt and my energy levels, and I gave that up. For me right now, and then I tried keto probably about 5 years ago, which worked really well. And I was in really good health at that time back in 2017, 2018, 2019, up until COVID happened. And then when COVID happened and we went remote, I ended up landing a really large client, and that took up a lot of my time. And I had to build out a lot of the infrastructure, and there were some changes. Whenever you're building out infrastructure, I had to put key leadership in place, ensure deliverability. So I would say up until about 5 months ago, I was really inundated from the day-to-day on the business standpoint. But since then, and we made some changes, and I think we've dialed it in really well. I was able to kind of get back and start focusing on my health. And that's when I started the carnivore diet, which I started going to the gym, and then it led me to basically trying the carnivore diet. But interesting enough, as soon as I started, which I stripped everything, and I was just eating basically red meat for twice a day, 2 pounds a day. And that was all I was eating for about 6 weeks. And believe it or not, my energy levels went up. I was satiated. I was full all the time. And there was a lot of good that came out of it. But then started seeing a naturopathic doctor out here in AZ. And you know, she was like, keep doing what you're doing. It seems like it's working for you. But if you want to start adding some fibers or some fruit, things like that. So I started slowly adding some fruit, added an apple, started doing some other things. And more recently, I would say I'm still carnivore these last week or two, but I would say I've gone towards more of a paleo type of diet where it's more all natural. Either way, it's really working for me.
Nice.
I feel better. I'm not bloated. I don't have any GI issues. Energy levels are great. I'm performing, especially since I started adding some of the fruit back into my diet, performing a lot better at the gym. So that's been very helpful. But yeah, it's just, for me, it's wake up in the morning, probably do a cold shower, hit the gym, and then I'm usually on my computer ready to work. There's some breathing techniques that I'll do in there too. I've done like some of the Wim Hof and some of that in the past, really interested in that stuff. And then, yeah, I'm usually in my meetings around 8 o'clock, I'd say 7:30, 8, depending on what's going on that day. Sometimes it's late as 8:30. So depending on my day and what my schedule is like, I'll try to get on the phones or in my meetings, typically, which are all virtual, by around that time. So yeah, it's been pretty cool.
Sounds good. I love the biohacking.
Yeah, it's cool. There's some really cool guys that are on YouTube that are doing some awesome stuff. And I don't want to give too many plugs out there, but I really like Mike Munsell, the high intensity health guy. He's really likes to break down a lot of the science. And I personally like to go into like PubMed and just kind of read on different studies that have actually occurred and, you know, on different things. And it's really interesting. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say I understand 100% of it. Not a scientist, because some of it's very, very technical. But then you watch guys like Mike Munsell, and then there's Dr. Peter Attia, some of these guys that are out there that actually break it down in layman's terms and get you to understand that there's a lot of cool alternative, you know, methods of health that I think, you know, it's beyond conventional medical advice, I think. But I think there's enough science and data out there that allows people to make an educated guess, I guess, based on their health, to do the right thing.
It's good to hear that you have that as a focus for you, because as an entrepreneur, you can easily just get sucked into running the business and growing the business and leave your health to the side. And you really need to have that dedicated time every day to focus on yourself.
No, for sure. For sure. It's 100%. I mean, how are you gonna, you got to be optimal, right, in what you're doing, especially as an entrepreneur. It's really important, as you stated, to be in your, you know, best mental and physical, you know, state to be able to execute.
Well, we've taken up a lot of your time. I just want to throw one last question at you, and then we can wrap this baby up. You know, throughout your ventures and your journey, I'd love to hear, you know, any lessons learned, tips for our listeners, things that you want people to remember, you know, that you want to share with them?
Parting wisdom from Clint.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no. I think that and entrepreneurs are usually the first to jump in with both feet and take that chance. So but being able to properly plan is really important when starting a new venture. And what I found for me personally, whatever I'm doing, and some people might be able to, use this. There's a framework called PPT that I use heavily whenever I'm starting a new division, or let's just say, for instance, I want to start a new site, offshore. PPT stands for People, Process, Technology, right? So kind of lining up what are your people resources? It's not just your employees, but it's also your vendors or your consultants or whoever it is. And then understanding what is the technology that you're going to be utilizing to execute on whatever it is that you're trying to execute, and then the process that binds that all together.
Right.
It's probably been about 2-3 years, maybe 3 years since I've been using the framework. You always use some sort of framework. You might not know you are, but you are, to start a venture or whatever it is that you're doing to expand or however it is. But when you have that type of framework in mind, and let's just say, for instance, like when I was, I don't know, let's say I'm starting a new division or a new line of business that's going to require, for me to do X, Y, and Z. Understanding what that objective is. And I use a lot of the framework when it comes to, it's basically key results, objectives and key results, and then having those KPIs that are tied to those objectives and key results. But then when you're trying to achieve that objective, right, breaking it out into, these are my people, this is the vendors, these are the contractors, this is what I'm going to be working with, this is my, human resources or human capital that I'm going to be using, this is the technology that I'm going to be using, and then bring it together and having those processes outlined. I think it just makes things a lot easier from an execution standpoint, and you ensure better success, as opposed to, ending up in pitfalls. It's a better proactive approach than just not having a plan at all. So
good final nugget of wisdom. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we're about out of time. Clint, really appreciate you coming on the podcast today, and
Mike,
wish you the best of success.
Thank you so much. This has been awesome. I really appreciate it, and hoping we can get together here soon. Next time I'm in Chicago.
I'm in for that.
For sure.
Okay.
Thanks, Clint.
Thanks, guys.
Everybody got a dream, let me show you all love. From an idea, working it into a startup. This the show that you need, what more could you ask for? Never know who become the CEO next door. Tune in, every episode insightful. The type of vibe you will want to subscribe to. Let's go. Hey.